Prep Rebel here. Part 2 of the, or part 3 actually. The first part was thawing, the second part was making the brine. Now we're going to trim up the brisket. So you're going to need a few items here. You're going to need a large sheet pan, some gloves, a marinade needle, a good sharp knife, and a large container big enough to hold the brisket and the brine once you're done. Once you've got the brisket in the brine in the container, you're going to need a couple of plates to completely keep the brisket submerged in the brine. Okay, now this is a 16-pound brisket, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim it up so that it's ready as well as I can get it, so that it's ready for this, ready for the brine, and then ultimately ready for the smoker after all of the process is done. So we'll just go step by step here. All right. Hopefully you can see all that. Move my paper towels out of the way. Now I've just removed it out of the bag. All right. You'll notice here, there's some silver skin, and it's got a good amount of fat on. This is the going to be the bottom side. Okay. The fat side right here has a good amount of fat on it. So we're going to take a lot of that off, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to reserve the fat and save it for either sausage making or making burgers, or grinding it with other meat to give me a better fat content. All right, so first things first, you're going to get as much of the moisture off of the brisket as you can. Make it a little easier to move it around and work with it. And then we'll just keep on going like that. All right, get that stuff out of the way so I don't poke myself. All right. I like to keep my station as clean as I can while I'm working on stuff like this. Clean as you go type of thing, okay? Now there's a good amount of fat on this brisket. This is a full brisket from Sam's Club. First thing I'm going to do with my knife, I'm going to take off this silver skin here. All right, so get underneath it. Fry it up a little bit. And do the best you can with it. Once you've got some of it there, grab it with a piece of paper towel, and it makes it easier to hold on to, and then you can start to pull it away from the meat. And you want to take the silver skin off, because it's going to not allow the seasoning into the meat, right? And you want to, it's the same with the fat. You want to remove a lot of the fat so that the seasoning will get in there, because the brine will have a hard time penetrating the silver skin. And it just takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of time, so you got to work at it. Once you get going on it, it'll go fairly quickly. Now, sometimes what you'll have to do is get a hold of it, the spot, and then just run your knife just like that, so that you can get most of that off of there. Once that's done, see how it comes off now? You're going to take a little bit of meat with it, but that's all right. It's not that much. The ultimate goal here, though, is to get the silver skin and leave 99% of the meat. It's the same with ribs. You know, in the back of the ribs, you'll find the silver skin. You want to do the same thing with that, so that you can get the seasoning to the meat properly. And it's a little bit of a job, but it's definitely worthwhile doing. Just like anything else that's worthwhile is worth doing. And this is why you want a sharp knife. And you just want to take your time with it. Go nice and slow. And get the majority of it off as you can. The worst and most dangerous tool in your kitchen is a dull knife. Sharp knives are way less dangerous. And you just go at it until you're satisfied that you've got what you want off of there. And you can see that with using the paper towel, you get a better grip on your meat and on the silver skin itself. Now you want to, when you're trimming these and getting them ready to go in the smoker, what you want to make sure you do is leave some of the fat on, because that's how your moisture is going to get into the meat, and it's also how your seasoning is going to get into the meat. Okay, so I got most of that off of there. I'm happy with that. So now we're going to start here with this big piece of fat here. Okay, I'm just going to trim off, and like I said, I'm going to reserve. See, that's all fat, right? I'll reserve this and use that for other cooking projects. But the seasoning would not go through that, so there's some people will say, well, you can cross hatch it and all that stuff. And fat is flavor, but too much fat is a bit of a hindrance when you're doing this kind of thing. And like I said, you just go slow. We're going to do the bottom side first. And you can feel the fat right there. You can feel how thick that is. Right? Now there's two parts to a brisket. There's the point, which is the fattier end, and holds more of the juices. And then there's the flat on this side. This is the point. This is the flat. All right, the flat is usually less fatty and a little bit more dry. And when you cook this or when you smoke it, you're going to place this fat side up. Okay, so that's on the other side of this brisket. See how much fat is there? That's still pretty hard. You trim down as much as you can, but you still want to leave a good amount of fat on the meat so that you retain the moisture when you're cooking it. Okay, so that, a little bit more there. And you just sort of slowly go with it. And just pull up as you go. And you can gradually get to the point where you've got what you don't want on there. And then you've got to trim. And all this fat that I'm trimming off here, so you can go in between, right? You can find basically where it is. And you'll see little layers. Now if you take a little bit of the meat with you, or with the fat, that's fine. But you want to make it so that you get a good amount of the fat off of this side. Like that, okay? Now there's another piece right here. All right, so that's pretty good on there. Now you'll see along here, there's more of the fat here. And it's all sort of bubbly like that, bubbled up. We're going to take that off as well and square it up a bit. See? That's a lot of fat. And ultimately, the brine will not go through that. So what you want to do is you just want to trim it up. And it makes it a lot easier for cooking too. This is why you want a sharp knife. Okay. This was the silver skin. That can be gone. Okay, so now on this edge, you'll notice that there's a good chunk of fat here as well. See? And what we're going to do is we're going to take all of that off and square up this edge. A little bit more there, and there's lots in here, so I think I'll get that from the other side. You'll also notice here, on this here, all of that fat, that's all pretty much going to come off, and we're just going to square the side up. And you can see on this, when I make this cut, how I'm taking just a tiny bit of the meat. I'll show it to you in a second. You just slowly run your knife along. And take that off like that. Now see, I took a little tiny bit of that, but that'll go in with the fat. And when I grind my meat and my fat together, then that will add flavor to whatever I'm grinding and making. This piece right here, we're just going to square that off. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Now this piece here, this side, you can see here where I started to take a lot of this fat off. We're going to take some of this off, but we're going to leave a fair amount so that when we're smoking it, this side will be up, because when you're cooking it, the fat will go through, it'll render through the meat and keep it moist. And it's a little bit of a job, but you just go for it and you just go to it. And take your time. see, like, this is all a good chunk of fat. And you just want to bring that down just a little bit. You don't want to take it all, but you want to take a good bunch of it. And then just sort of find where the fat will come off and just start working from there. Once you've done a couple of these, it's a whole lot easier to figure out where you're going with it. Right, so I'd leave this, but I'm going to take a bunch of this off because that's pretty thick, right? And they have to change knives here to get a better cut. This one's dulled down a little bit now. All right. And all this bubbly part here, that is not going to accept any kind of brine or seasoning or anything like that. Right? To sharpen that one, I'm going to get my butcher knife. Carving knife, I guess you'd call it. Just slowly and methodically trim it up. And before you know it, you'll have a brisket that's ready to go in your brine. Piece is pretty fatty right there. All right, that little piece there. Okay. Now, the next part is where I'll show you here in a second. Now remember, this is the point, this is the flat, right? Right here, this is a big chunk of fat in here. So just take your knife, run down through that, and we're going to just level it out a bit. So that you can actually see, because this isn't going to be very appetizing, right? And a lot of it won't render down. So we're just going to take it out of there and level this area off. And you can just follow along where the meat will tell you, like the grain on this runs a little bit differently between the flat and the point. And when you're cutting meat, you always want to, when you're serving it, you always want to cut against the grain. And that way you get a tender bite. Much more tender, much easier to chew. Much more enjoyable. Yeah. This is a pretty fatty brisket. But there's good to be said about that too, because it's going to have a lot of flavor. Now when you're smoking this, it'll have a really easier time to smoke if it's a little flatter. And like I said, you know, this amount of fat like that, the heavy stuff won't accept seasoning or or the brine very well. And we just take that all out of there. See, it lays a little bit flatter. Just trim this up a little bit more. A good piece of gristle here. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to square this up a little bit. There's still a lot of fat here. And that's basically what you're doing when you're trimming the brisket to get it ready. There's more here, see? See how thick that is? And it's just a thing about patience, you know. That's what you're after. And see this rough stuff here too, right? So we're just gonna take that off as well. Make it look all pretty. See? And along here, and a little bit on this side. It's just a nice even cut. Make sure you don't cut yourself in the process. A little tiny bit more there. That looks pretty good. You just take your time. See how spongy this is. Take that out of there. And this is that area that I was telling you about where you can find all of that line. And this is where it separates from the point to the flat. That's good. Now that the trimming has been done, pretty much, one more little piece here. What we're going to do next, remember the brine we made in the last video? Well, that's going to come into play here, a little bit of it anyways, to begin with. Because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of that brine that we made and I'm going to marinate this meat with a marinade needle. That way it gets brine on the inside as well as the outside. And there you go. See, there's a lot of fat right there too. Majority of this should be good though. Just basically like that. Okay, so right here, like I was telling you, right in this area here, if you were to run all the way down through this on an angle down like this, this would be the flat, and then you would have the point here, right? And you could separate it that way. But you see how the grain runs this way, right? So when we're cutting this, after it's done, we'll cut it this way on the flat against the grain so that the pieces come off really tender and have a nice bend and chew to them. And a little bit more. All right, I think that's pretty much done. Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's good. I'm happy with that. Always good to have gloves. Now see, that's a good amount of fat. This one was pretty fatty. But that's what you get when you buy a whole brisket, you know, in these box stores, big box stores, instead of going to a butcher. But then sometimes when you go to a butcher, it's not always the best either. All right, so I'm going to take some of that brine. And so let's do this. Now you're not going to be putting the berries and the spices in there, just the liquid. All right. And we're just going to give this meat a head start. Give it a little bit extra chance to, oops. Get some extra flavoring. Okay. Oops. Come on, play nice. All right. That's that. Now comes the fun part. I'll be right back. Okay, so like I said, you're going to need a container big enough to hold the brisket and the brine. All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to take the brisket and we're going to place it into this container. All right, just like that. Move over. Thank you. All right. Now comes the fun part. Okay, so now that we've got the brisket trimmed and the brine is cooled down, we're going to add this brine to this brisket. Let's spoon here. Okay, so that is now there. Now what we're going to do to make this ready to go is we're going to add 28 more cups of cool water to this container, or thereabouts. What you want to do is you want to get the brisket submerged and kept submerged. Alright, so it's looking pretty good. Now this, once it's in here and the water is covering it and the brine is all mixing together, you're going to put a couple of plates on the top of this to hold it down. Once that's done, you're going to put it in the fridge, and every day for the next number of days, you're going to take the plates out. I'll take it out of the fridge, take the plates out, and you're going to turn the meat and then put it back in the fridge, cover it up again. That way, all of the meat and everything else gets an equal chance with the brine. You see how it floats right now? When this process is done, it won't be doing that. Okay, so that was 8. This is 16. What did I say? 24, 28. Eight, 16, 24. 24. The reason I put the ice in there was because the water wasn't quite cold enough to my liking. Okay. 28 cups. Nope. And what that's going to do is that'll hold the meat under the water, submerged. And what you'll do is you'll do this every day for the next, 20, what I'm going to do is the next 20 to 24 days. I will be in the fridge, turn it in the fridge, 24 days. And I'll mark that on my calendar. But like I said, everybody that makes a pastrami does theirs a little bit differently. For me, this is a 30-day journey. For some, they only leave it in the brine for 5-7 days. All right. I'm not quite sure what it is at how they process it at Katz's or Sherman's or wherever they're having their pastramis made, but this is only the second part, folks. Right? This is only the second part. We've still got 4 more steps to go until this is completed. And then once this part of it's done, we take this whole thing out of the fridge, take the meat out onto the tray, and then wash this up because we're going to need this again for a couple of days. And then what goes in with the meat that time, after all of this, we get rid of the brine, and then it's a desalination period. Okay, so I hope you've enjoyed that, and this is the next step. So like I said, I hope you enjoyed. Day 2 of my pastrami adventure was yesterday. This is day 3, and we'll carry on from there. Have a great one. Prep Rebel out.